If you're enjoying this journey into Helen's unexpected adventure, consider subscribing to our channel for more captivating stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Now, let's dive into this thrilling tale. The fluorescent lights of O'Hare International Airport cast a harsh glow over the crowded terminal. Helen Carter stood at the expansive window, her weathered hand pressed against the cool glass as she watched her son's plane taxi toward the runway. At 68, with silver hair neatly pinned back and reading glasses hanging from a beaded chain around her neck, Helen embodied the retired history teacher she was: observant, patient, and methodical. "Grandma Helen," a small voice broke through her thoughts. "Can we get ice cream now?" Helen turned to her 7-year-old granddaughter, Bethany, a miniature version of Robert with the same intelligent eyes and determined chin. The child clutched a well-worn stuffed rabbit with mismatched button eyes, its plush body squeezed tightly against her chest. "Of course, sweetheart. Your daddy's plane is taking off now. Let's find that ice cream shop he mentioned." They wove through the bustling terminal, Bethany's small hand firmly clasped in Helen's. The little girl had been unusually quiet since Robert's departure for his business emergency in London. Helen understood. These sudden trips were difficult for a child still adjusting to her parents' divorce. As they approached the ice cream parlor, Bethany suddenly froze. Her small fingers dug into Helen's palm with surprising strength. "Grandma," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the airport's din. "We need to leave. Right now." Helen looked down, startled by the urgency in her granddaughter's voice. Bethany's face had drained of color, her eyes wide with an expression Helen had never seen before. Pure, undiluted fear. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" Bethany pulled Helen toward a nearby bathroom, glancing frantically over her shoulder. Once inside, she drew Helen close, standing on tiptoes to reach her grandmother's ear. "Daddy said they might come after he left. Men in dark suits. He said if I saw them, we had to run away. Don't look back. Don't go home." She clutched her rabbit tighter. "He said Mr. Hoppy would help us know what to do." Helen's heart hammered against her ribs. Robert was many things. Brilliant, dedicated, sometimes too serious, but never one for dramatic games or unnecessary fear. "Bethany, are you sure?" "They're by the ice cream place now. 2 men, black suits. One has a scar on his face. Daddy showed me a picture. He said they're bad men." Helen straightened, her decades of classroom management coming to her aid. She took a calming breath and peered carefully through the bathroom door. Sure enough, 2 men in impeccable suits stood by the ice cream parlor, their eyes scanning the crowd with mechanical precision. One man, tall with broad shoulders, bore a thin scar that ran from his right temple to his jawline. "All right, Bethany," Helen said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "We're going to play a little game. We need to leave the airport without those men seeing us. Think we can do that?" Bethany nodded solemnly, her small face set with determination beyond her years. Helen quickly formulated a plan. "First, let's change how we look." She removed her distinctive red cardigan and pulled Bethany's colorful headband from her blonde curls. She took off her reading glasses and tucked them away. "Now, walk normally, but stay close to that family with the luggage cart. We'll pretend we're with them." They exited the bathroom and seamlessly fell in step with a large family heading toward the exit. Helen's mind raced. Robert wouldn't frighten Bethany without reason. Something was terribly wrong, and somehow, her quiet, rule-following son was at the center of it. As they approached the terminal exit, Helen glanced back. The men had split up, moving with purposeful strides through the crowd. One was speaking into his wrist. Helen's breath caught in her throat as his gaze swept over them. "Don't look back," Helen whispered to Bethany, guiding her toward the taxi stand. "Where to?" asked the driver as they climbed into the cab. Helen hesitated. They couldn't go home. Robert had made that clear. "The Magnificent Mile, please," Helen said, naming the busy shopping district where they could easily disappear into the crowd. "Macy's department store." As the taxi pulled away from the curb, Helen saw the scar-faced man emerge from the terminal doors, scanning the pickup area with predatory focus. She ducked down, shielding Bethany with her body until they turned onto the highway. Only then did Helen realize she was trembling. "Grandma," Bethany whispered, her small voice resolute despite the fear in her eyes. "Daddy said Mr. Hoppy has something important inside him, something that will keep us safe." The bustling interior of Macy's provided temporary sanctuary. Helen guided Bethany to the quietest corner of the children's department, where they sat on a plush ottoman near a display of winter coats. "All right, Bethany," Helen whispered. "Tell me exactly what your father said." Bethany clutched Mr. Hoppy to her chest, her small fingers working at a hidden seam along the rabbit's back. "Daddy said that if the bad men ever came, I needed to show you what's inside Mr. Hoppy. He said you would know what to do because you're the smartest person he knows." Helen felt a surge of emotion at her son's faith in her. Robert had always been methodical, cautious, traits that had served him well as financial director at Global Meridian Investments. If he had involved Bethany in whatever trouble he'd discovered, the situation must be dire indeed. With careful movements, Bethany opened a concealed zipper in the rabbit's back. From within the stuffing, she extracted a small waterproof pouch and handed it to Helen. Helen's hands shook as she unzipped the pouch. Inside lay a USB drive, a folded note in Robert's precise handwriting, several $100s in cash, 2 prepaid phones still in their packaging, and a key with a numbered tag. She unfolded the note, angling it away from curious eyes. "Mom, if you're reading this, then what I feared has happened. I discovered something at Global Meridian that puts us all in danger. The evidence on this drive proves the company has been laundering money for drug cartels and facilitating illegal weapons deals. Senior executives are involved, including people with powerful connections. I've made copies and arrangements. Take Bethany and follow these instructions exactly. 1. Go to the Tribune Tower. Ask for Eliza Chen, investigative reporter. Give her the USB. Tell her it's from the financial whistleblower. She'll know. 2. Use the key for locker room 722 at Union Station. Inside is everything you'll need. 3. Take the cash. Buy new clothes. Dispose of your phones. Use the prepaid ones only for emergencies. 4. Get out of Chicago. Go to the cabin in Upper Michigan. Remember when we went fishing? That place. Stay until I contact you or Rachel does. I'm so sorry to put this on you. I had no choice. Trust no one. The FBI has been compromised at the Chicago office. If you need immediate help, call the number programmed in the new phones. It's someone I trust. Keep Bethany safe. Tell her I love her more than anything." Robert Helen folded the note with trembling fingers. Her son, always so proper and law-abiding, had uncovered something terrible enough to send him fleeing to London and his daughter into hiding. The magnitude of their situation hit her like a physical blow. "Grandma, are you okay?" Bethany's voice was small but steady. Helen composed her features and smiled at her granddaughter. "Yes, sweetheart. Your daddy left us a treasure map, and we're going to follow it. But first, we need disguises." They shopped quickly, selecting nondescript clothing in colors and styles Helen would never normally choose. Helen purchased a shoulder-length brown wig and a pair of non-prescription glasses with thick frames. For Bethany, they found a Cubs baseball cap to tuck her distinctive blonde curls under and a boyish jacket. In the department store bathroom, they changed. Helen stared at her transformed reflection. A stranger looked back at her. She carefully packed their discarded clothes into the shopping bags to dispose of later. "We look like spies," Bethany whispered, a flicker of excitement breaking through her fear. "Very clever spies," Helen agreed, trying to maintain a sense of adventure rather than danger. She activated one of the prepaid phones and programmed the emergency contact number from Robert's note. "Now, we need to complete our mission." They exited through a different department store entrance, Helen constantly scanning their surroundings. The crisp October air carried the promise of an early winter as they navigated the crowded sidewalks toward the Tribune Tower. As they approached the neo-Gothic building, Helen felt exposed. Would Robert's pursuers anticipate this move? Was she leading Bethany into danger rather than away from it? "Remember, sweetheart," Helen said, squeezing Bethany's hand. "If anything happens, you run into a crowd and shout for help. Don't worry about me." Bethany looked up, her eyes solemn beyond her years. "We stay together, Grandma. That's what Daddy would want." Helen swallowed hard and nodded. Together, They pushed through the revolving doors into the lobby of the Chicago Tribune. The Tribune Tower lobby hummed with activity. Journalists hurried across the polished marble floor, couriers delivered packages, and tourists admired the famous building's interior. Helen approached the reception desk, Bethany's hand firmly in hers. "I need to see Eliza Chen," Helen said, keeping her voice steady. "It's urgent." The receptionist, a young man with fashionable glasses and a skeptical expression, looked up from his computer. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but she'll want to see me. Tell her it's about the financial whistleblower." The receptionist's expression shifted subtly. He picked up his phone and spoke in a low voice. After a brief conversation, he nodded toward a bank of elevators. 14th floor, Ms. Chen's assistant will meet you." The elevator ride felt interminable. Bethany pressed against Helen's side, her small body tense. "Is Ms. Chen going to help Daddy?" she whispered. Helen squeezed her granddaughter's shoulder. "I believe she will." The elevator doors opened to reveal a warren of cubicles and glass-walled offices. A woman with a sleek bob and alert eyes approached them immediately. "I'm Andrea, Eliza's assistant. Please follow me." She led them through a maze of desks to a corner office. Inside, a woman in her early 40s sat behind a desk covered with documents and 2 computer monitors. Eliza Chen had the focused intensity Helen recognized from serious journalists, observant eyes that missed nothing, and an air of controlled urgency. "Please close the door," Eliza said, standing to greet them. Once Andrea had left, she gestured to chairs. "You mentioned the financial whistleblower." Helen nodded, suddenly hesitant. What if this was a mistake? What if Eliza couldn't be trusted? As if sensing her doubt, Eliza spoke softly. 2 weeks ago, I received an anonymous tip about money laundering at Global Meridian Investments. The source provided enough documentation to start an investigation, but said more evidence would follow. I've been waiting. Her gaze shifted to Bethany. I didn't expect it to come via such a young courier. Helen removed the USB drive from her purse. My son, Robert Carter, sent this. He's the financial director at Global Meridian. He's had to leave the country. Eliza's expression remained neutral, but her posture tensed. And you are? Helen Carter. This is Bethany, Robert's daughter. Helen placed the drive on the desk. Robert said this contains evidence of money laundering for drug cartels and illegal weapons deals involving high-ranking executives at Global Meridian. He wanted you to have it. Eliza picked up the drive carefully, as if it might burn her fingers. This is extremely serious. If what you're saying is true, you and your granddaughter could be in considerable danger. We already are, Helen replied, explaining their airport escape. Eliza inserted the drive into her computer and scanned the contents quickly. Her eyebrows rose incrementally as she opened several files. This is extensive. Transaction records, offshore account numbers, communications. She looked up sharply. Your son had access to extremely sensitive information. This implicates at least 3 members of Global Meridian's executive board and suggests connections to politicians and possibly federal officials. Will you publish it? Helen asked. Not immediately. This needs verification and legal review. But yes, eventually. Eliza leaned forward. Where is your son now? London, supposedly. But I don't know if that's true or a cover. Helen hesitated. We have somewhere to go. Somewhere safe, I hope. Eliza nodded. That's probably wise. I can arrange for… No, Helen interrupted, remembering Robert's warning. We have our own arrangements. The fewer people who know, the better. Eliza studied them for a long moment before nodding. I understand, but take my card. If you need anything at all, call me directly, not the main number. She wrote a cell number on the back of her business card. There's something else you should know, Eliza added, lowering her voice. 2 days ago, a federal agent came asking questions about my investigation into Global Meridian. He wasn't from any of the usual departments that handle financial crimes. I checked his credentials afterward. They were genuine, but there was something off about the whole interaction. Helen felt a chill. Robert's note had mentioned the FBI being compromised. Be careful who you trust, Helen said. Always am, Eliza replied with a grim smile. Now, is there anything else I can do for you before you go? Helen thought of their next steps: Union Station, then somehow getting to Michigan. We need to reach Union Station without being followed. Eliza's expression turned thoughtful. I think I can help with that. Give me 15 minutes. True to her word, 15 minutes later, Helen and Bethany exited the Tribune Tower through the loading dock, where they were met by a weather-beaten Tribune delivery van. This is Miguel, Eliza said, introducing the driver. He'll get you to Union Station through service routes, less chance of being spotted. As they climbed into the van, Eliza touched Helen's arm. When this breaks, it's going to be enormous. Your son is very brave. Or very foolish, Helen murmured. Sometimes they're the same thing, Eliza replied. Good luck, Mrs. Carter. The delivery van wound through service alleys and back streets, eventually emerging 2 blocks from Union Station. Miguel dropped them off with a quiet, God bless, before pulling away. Hand in hand, Helen and Bethany walked toward the Grand Beaux-Arts building, each step bringing them closer to whatever Robert had left for them, and hopefully closer to safety. Union Station's Great Hall stretched above them, its soaring barrel-vaulted ceiling adorned with intricate coffers and massive skylights that bathed the marble floor in afternoon sunlight. Under different circumstances, Helen might have paused to appreciate the architectural splendor, or to share a history lesson with Bethany about the golden age of rail travel. Today, however, the cavernous space only made her feel vulnerable and exposed. Stay close, she murmured to Bethany as they made their way toward the luggage storage area. The numbered key burned in Helen's pocket like a hot coal. The storage facilities were located in a less trafficked section of the station. Helen approached the bank of lockers, scanning the numbers until she found 722. She glanced around carefully before inserting the key and turning it with a soft click. Inside the locker sat a black backpack. Helen removed it quickly and closed the locker, guiding Bethany to a quiet corner where they could examine the contents. The backpack contained 2 changes of clothes for each of them, a laptop, additional cash, 2 passports that Helen immediately recognized as expertly crafted forgeries bearing their photographs, but different names, a loaded prepaid credit card, car rental documents for a vehicle waiting at a suburban location, and a set of keys with a small remote. At the bottom of the bag lay a sealed envelope addressed to Helen in Robert's handwriting. She opened it with trembling fingers. Mom, if you're reading this, you've made it to step 2. The car is waiting at the Enterprise Rent-A-Car in Evanston. It's registered under the name on your new ID. The cabin keys are in the side pocket of the backpack. The laptop contains additional evidence and contact protocols. Password: Bethany's birthday backward plus the year you started teaching. I need you to understand the gravity of what's happening. Global Meridian isn't just laundering money. They're facilitating transactions that have financed terrorist activities and destabilized governments. When I discovered the pattern, I took it to Arthur Chambers, the COO, thinking he wasn't involved. That was my mistake. Within hours, I noticed surveillance. Within days, I found evidence that someone had been in our house. I've made arrangements with people I trust. Rachel knows what's happening. I had to tell her to ensure Bethany's safety. She may contact you, but only if absolutely necessary. Stay at the cabin. Someone will reach out within 2 weeks. If no one contacts you by November 1st, use the second protocol on the laptop. I love you both. I'm sorry for bringing this danger to your door. R. Helen folded the letter carefully and tucked it away. Her mind reeled from the implications. Robert had uncovered something far more sinister than corporate fraud, something with international ramifications. And somehow Rachel was involved, the ex-daughter-in-law who had moved to Seattle after the divorce and rarely contacted them. Grandma? Bethany's voice pulled Helen from her thoughts. What do we do now? Helen forced a reassuring smile. Now we're going on an adventure to your dad's cabin in the woods. Would you like that? Bethany nodded solemnly. Will Daddy meet us there? Not right away, sweetheart. But he'll make sure we're safe. Helen checked her watch. First, we need to catch a train to Evanston to pick up our car. They made their way to the metro platforms, Helen constantly vigilant for men in suits or anyone paying them undue attention. As they boarded the northbound train, Helen caught a glimpse of a security camera swiveling in their direction. She turned away quickly. positioning herself to block Bethany from its view. The train ride to Evanston passed in tense silence. Helen used the time to create a mental inventory of what they would need for an extended stay at the cabin. Robert owned a remote property in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, a rustic retreat he'd purchased after his divorce, seeking solitude. Helen had visited once, finding it too isolated for her taste. Now, that isolation might save their lives. At the Evanston station, they disembarked and walked 6 blocks to the car rental office. Helen presented her forged ID with outward confidence, though her heart hammered against her ribs. The employee barely glanced at it before handing over the keys to a nondescript gray SUV. "Your husband already took care of everything," the young man said cheerfully. "The vehicle's parked in space 17. Have a nice trip." Helen nodded her thanks, marveling at Robert's thoroughness. Her quiet, rule-following son had planned this escape with military precision. What other secrets had he kept? Once in the SUV, Helen secured Bethany in the back seat and examined the vehicle's features. It was practical, unremarkable, and, most importantly, had a full tank of gas. A road atlas lay on the passenger seat, with the route to Upper Michigan already marked. "Ready for our adventure?" Helen asked, meeting Bethany's eyes in the rearview mirror. "Ready," Bethany replied, clutching Mr. Hoppy. "Grandma? Are we in danger?" Helen paused, considering her answer carefully. She wouldn't lie to the child, but neither would she instill unnecessary fear. "We're being very careful, sweetheart. Your daddy discovered some bad things that some powerful people did. He's trying to make sure those people face consequences for their actions. That makes him very brave, but it also means we need to stay hidden for a while." Bethany nodded thoughtfully. "Like when Harry Potter had to hide from Voldemort?" Helen smiled despite herself. "Something like that. And just like in those stories, the good people will help us." As they pulled onto the road heading north, Helen checked the rearview mirror obsessively. The suburban streets of Evanston gave way to highways, and gradually, the sprawling metropolis of Chicago receded behind them. With each mile marker they passed, Helen felt a fraction of tension leave her shoulders. They were running, but they were also following Robert's carefully laid plans. Whatever storm was coming, they had at least taken the first steps toward shelter. Dusk settled over the forest as Helen turned the SUV onto the narrow dirt road leading to Robert's cabin. They had been driving for nearly 8 hours, stopping only for quick meals and bathroom breaks. Bethany had fallen asleep an hour ago, her head lolling against the window. Mr. Hoppy clutched protectively to her chest. The Upper Peninsula of Michigan stretched around them like a primeval wilderness, dense forests of pine and birch, occasional glimpses of Lake Superior's vast expanse, and very few signs of human habitation. Robert had chosen this location well. It was nearly impossible to find unless you knew exactly where to look. The headlights illuminated a rustic cabin nestled among towering pines. Its wooden exterior had weathered to a silvery gray, and a covered porch wrapped around the front. In daylight, Helen knew, the cabin would command a breathtaking view of the lake through a clearing in the trees. She parked beside the cabin and gently woke Bethany. "We're here, sweetheart. This is your dad's special place." Bethany rubbed her eyes sleepily and peered out the window. "It looks like the house in the fairy tales." "It does, doesn't it?" Helen smiled, trying to maintain the sense of adventure. "Let's go inside and get settled." The cabin was cold and dark. Helen fumbled with the keys, finally locating the correct one for the heavy wooden door. Inside, she found the light switch and illuminated a cozy, open-plan living space. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, flanked by well-stocked bookshelves. A kitchen area occupied one corner, and a hallway presumably led to bedrooms. "It's freezing," Bethany observed, hugging herself. "We'll fix that right away." Helen located the thermostat and adjusted it, then moved to the fireplace. Thankfully, Robert had left a stack of firewood and kindling. Within minutes, she had a fire crackling, casting warm light across the room. As the cabin gradually warmed, Helen explored their temporary refuge. She found 2 bedrooms, one clearly Robert's, with its neatly made bed and sparse decorations, and a smaller room with twin beds that must have been intended for Bethany's visits. The bathroom was basic but functional, and the kitchen was well stocked with non-perishable items. A generator hummed outside, providing electricity, and the cabin drew water from a well system. Most importantly, in a locked cabinet in Robert's bedroom, Helen discovered a shotgun and ammunition. She had learned to shoot during her marriage to Robert's father, though she hadn't handled a firearm in decades. She checked that the gun was unloaded before returning it to the cabinet, memorizing its location. By the time Helen had prepared a simple dinner from canned soup and crackers, Bethany had set up an elaborate scenario with Mr. Hoppy and several stuffed animals she'd found in her room. The child's resilience amazed Helen. Despite the day's terrifying events, Bethany had adapted with remarkable flexibility. After dinner, Helen settled Bethany in her bed with a story from one of Robert's old books. The child fell asleep almost instantly, exhausted from their journey. Alone at last, Helen retrieved the laptop from the backpack and sat at the kitchen table. She entered the password, Bethany's birthday backward followed by 1987, the year she had begun her teaching career. The screen illuminated, revealing a desktop with several labeled folders. For the next 3 hours, Helen immersed herself in Robert's discoveries. The evidence was damning and meticulously documented. Global Meridian Investments, one of the country's most respected financial institutions, had been laundering billions of dollars for drug cartels, arms dealers, and corrupt political regimes. Robert had traced the money through a labyrinth of offshore accounts and shell corporations, all leading back to Global Meridian's senior management. Most disturbing were the connections Robert had uncovered between Global Meridian and several high-ranking officials in federal law enforcement and regulatory agencies. These officials had systematically buried investigations and redirected inquiries away from the company. The corruption extended far beyond corporate malfeasance. It reached into the heart of government. A document labeled Safe Contacts listed names and encrypted contact information for individuals Robert apparently trusted. An assistant director at the FBI's Washington office, a prosecutor with the Southern District of New York, and several journalists besides Eliza Chen. Helen was so absorbed in her reading that the sudden banging on the cabin door nearly stopped her heart. She froze, her mind racing. No one knew they were here. No one except Robert, and perhaps the people hunting them. The knocking came again, more insistent. Helen closed the laptop and moved silently to Robert's bedroom, retrieving the shotgun. With trembling hands, she loaded 2 shells, just as Robert's father had taught her decades ago. "Grandma," Bethany appeared in the hallway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Someone's at the door. Go back to your room, sweetheart," Helen whispered. "Lock the door and don't come out until I call for you." Bethany's eyes widened at the sight of the gun, but she nodded and retreated to her bedroom. Helen heard the soft click of the lock engaging. With the shotgun held ready, Helen approached the front door. "Who's there?" she called, her voice steadier than she felt. "Helen, it's Rachel. Rachel Carter. Please open the door. It's freezing out here." Helen's mind whirled. Rachel? Robert's ex-wife? The woman who had moved to Seattle after a bitter divorce, who rarely called to check on her own daughter? What was she doing here? "Prove it's you," Helen demanded. A sigh from the other side of the door. "You have a scar on your left wrist from when you tried to separate Robert and his brother during a fight over a model airplane when Robert was 12. You still use the china teacups your mother left you, but only on special occasions. And you keep a photo of Robert's high school graduation in your wallet, even though he hates how his hair looked that day." Helen lowered the shotgun slightly. Those details were too specific to be researched. She unlocked the door, but kept the chain engaged, opening it just enough to peer out. Rachel stood on the porch, her breath fogging in the cold air. She looked thinner than Helen remembered, her once stylish appearance replaced by practical outdoor clothing and a severe ponytail. Dark circles underscored her eyes and her expression was grim. "May I come in?" Rachel asked. "I have information Robert wanted me to share, and I've been driving for 14 hours straight." Helen hesitated, then closed the door to disengage the chain before reopening it fully. Rachel stepped inside, her gaze immediately fixing on the shotgun. "I see Robert prepared you," she commented. "What are you doing here?" Helen demanded, not lowering the weapon. "Why would Robert involve you after everything that happened?" Rachel's expression softened slightly. "Because despite our differences, He knows I would do anything to protect Bethany. She glanced toward the hallway. Is she here? Is she safe? She's asleep, Helen said. And you still haven't explained why you're here. Rachel sank onto the sofa, suddenly looking exhausted. Because the situation is worse than Robert initially thought. The corruption doesn't just reach into federal agencies, it extends to international intelligence communities. She met Helen's gaze directly. And because I work for the CIA, Helen, I always have. The silence that followed Rachel's revelation was broken only by the crackling of the fire. Helen stared at her former daughter-in-law, struggling to reconcile this new information with the woman she thought she knew. The marketing executive who had married Robert after a whirlwind romance and divorced him just as suddenly 8 years later. That's not possible, Helen finally managed. You worked for a marketing firm in Chicago. You met Robert at a charity gala. Rachel's smile was tinged with sadness. That was my cover. The CIA has officers embedded throughout the private sector, especially in industries with international connections. Global Meridian has been on our radar for years, but we could never get close enough to gather concrete evidence. Until Robert married you, Helen said, the pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. You used my son. Rachel flinched. It wasn't supposed to happen that way. The relationship was meant to be casual, just enough to give me access to Global Meridian's social circles. But then, she trailed off, looking down at her hands. You fell in love with him, Helen finished. Yes. Rachel's voice was barely audible. And that compromised everything. My handlers wanted me to stay in place, but I couldn't lie to him anymore. So I manufactured reasons for a divorce, moved to Seattle, and continued monitoring from a distance. She looked up, her eyes glittering with unshed tears. I never stopped loving him, Helen. Or Bethany. But my work came first, Helen said coldly, finally lowering the shotgun and setting it aside. Does Robert know about your real job? He figured it out when all this started unfolding. That's why he contacted me after he discovered the evidence. He knew I would have resources to help. From the hallway came a small voice. Mommy? Bethany stood in the doorway, Mr. Hoppy dangling from one hand. For a moment, no one moved. Then Rachel opened her arms, and Bethany flew into them. Hey, Ladybug, Rachel whispered, holding her daughter tightly. I've missed you so much. Did you come to help us hide from the bad men? Bethany asked, her face buried in Rachel's shoulder. I did. And to tell you both some important news. Rachel looked up at Helen over Bethany's head. Robert is safe. He's not in London. That was a diversion. He's at a secure location working with a joint task force from multiple agencies. The evidence he gathered, combined with what Eliza Chen published yesterday, has initiated one of the largest financial crime investigations in history. Helen sank into a chair, relief washing over her. Yesterday? She published already? Rachel nodded. A preliminary report, heavily redacted but enough to start an avalanche. Global Meridian's stock plunged 80%. Trading was halted. 4 executives have been arrested, including the CEO and COO. More arrests are coming. So it's over? Helen asked. We can go home? Rachel's expression grew serious. Not yet. The investigation has revealed connections even more extensive than we initially thought. Global Meridian was merely one node in a vast network of corruption. There are powerful people who stand to lose everything when this fully unravels. People with resources and desperation. She gently disengaged from Bethany. Sweetheart, why don't you go back to bed for a little while? Grandma and I need to talk about grown-up things. Bethany looked between them, clearly reluctant. Will you be here when I wake up? I promise, Rachel said, kissing her daughter's forehead. We'll have breakfast together. Once Bethany had returned to her room, Rachel continued in a lower voice. The men who were watching you at the airport weren't just Global Meridian security. They're mercenaries hired by a consortium of the individuals implicated in Robert's evidence. They're not just trying to recover the evidence anymore. They're eliminating loose ends. A chill ran down Helen's spine. Are you saying they would hurt a child? I'm saying they've already demonstrated they have no boundaries. Rachel's expression hardened. 2 whistleblowers from other organizations involved in this network have disappeared in the last week. A regulatory investigator's car exploded in a mechanical failure. This goes beyond corporate crime. It's organized, international, and deadly. Helen processed this information, her teacher's mind organizing the facts methodically despite her fear. What happens now? We need to move you and Bethany somewhere even safer. Witness protection isn't an option because of the compromised federal connections. My agency has arranged for new identities and relocation to New Zealand. You'll be housed in a secure community while the investigation continues. New Zealand? Helen repeated incredulously. For how long? At least 2 years, Rachel said softly. Until the entire network is dismantled and all trials are complete. Helen felt as if the floor had dropped from beneath her. Leave everything. Her home, her friends, her life. For years? Start over in a foreign country at 68? And Robert? He'll join you eventually, but not immediately. His testimony is crucial, and he'll need to remain in protective custody during the initial phases of prosecution. Helen stared into the fire, watching the flames consume the logs just as this situation had consumed their normal lives. Do we have a choice? Rachel's silence was answer enough. When do we leave? Helen asked finally. Tomorrow. A seaplane will land on the lake at dawn. It will take us to a private airfield in Canada, where we'll board a corporate jet to Auckland. Rachel reached out and took Helen's hand. I know this is overwhelming, but it's the only way to keep Bethany safe. And you too. Helen nodded slowly. I understand. Does Bethany know about what might happen to us? No, Rachel said. Robert and I agreed to shield her from as much as possible. She knows only that we're playing a very important game of hide and seek that might last a long time. Helen studied the woman before her. This stranger who had been family, then not, and now represented their only lifeline. Despite her lingering anger at Rachel's deception, Helen recognized the genuine concern in her eyes. She'll need stability, Helen said firmly. Structure, education, friends. A 7-year-old can't put her life on hold for 2 years. We've planned for that, Rachel assured her. The community in New Zealand includes other families in similar situations. There's a school, medical facilities, everything you'll need. It's beautiful there. Remote, but not isolated. You'll have a house near the ocean. Helen tried to imagine it. A new life on the other side of the world. At her age, she had expected to be settled, surrounded by familiar comforts and routines. Instead, she was about to become a fugitive, a guardian of secrets too dangerous to keep and too important to abandon. What about my house? My possessions? Everything will be placed in secure storage. Your financial assets will be managed by a blind trust. As far as anyone knows, you've taken an extended sabbatical to write your memoirs. Rachel attempted a smile. We've thought of everything. Except asking if this is what we want, Helen said, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. Rachel's expression softened with genuine regret. I know. And I'm sorry. If there were any other way... They sat in silence for several minutes, each lost in her own thoughts. Finally, Helen rose to her feet. We should get some sleep. If we're leaving at dawn, we have preparations to make. She paused, then added reluctantly, You can take Robert's room. I'll stay with Bethany. Thank you, Rachel said quietly. And Helen, for what it's worth, I never meant for any of this to touch you or Bethany. Robert's investigation progressed much further than anyone anticipated. He's remarkably thorough. He always was, Helen replied, a hint of pride warming her voice despite everything. Even as a child, he couldn't leave a puzzle unsolved or a question unanswered. Rachel nodded. It's what makes him an exceptional financial investigator, and a terrible person to try to hide corruption from. She hesitated, then added, He speaks of you often, you know, with such admiration. My mother would know what to do, he always says. Helen felt tears threatening and turned away. I'll see you in the morning. In Bethany's room, Helen slipped quietly into the empty twin bed. Her granddaughter slept peacefully, untroubled by the adult concerns that now weighed so heavily. Helen envied her that innocence, even as she mourned its inevitable end. Life as Bethany had known it was over, though the child didn't yet realize it. As exhaustion finally claimed her, Helen's last conscious thought was of Robert's face as he boarded that plane to London, a goodbye that now seemed a lifetime ago, though less than 24 hours had passed. Morning arrived with pale light filtering through pine branches and the distant sound of water lapping at the shore. Helen had slept fitfully, waking at every creak and rustle, her body tense with vigilance even in sleep. Bethany stirred and blinked up at her grandmother. "Is Mommy really here? Or did I dream it?" "She's really here," Helen confirmed, smoothing the child's tangled hair. "She's come to take us on a longer adventure." Bethany's eyes lit up. "Where are we going?" "Very far away, to a place called New Zealand. It's an island country with mountains and beaches and lots of sheep." "Will Daddy be there?" Helen hesitated. "Not right away, sweetheart, but he'll join us when he can." They packed quickly, taking only essentials from the cabin. Rachel emerged from Robert's room looking remarkably refreshed, her efficiency evident as she organized their departure. She had brought additional supplies, waterproof bags, warm clothing, even a small medical kit. As they ate a simple breakfast of oatmeal and dried fruit, Rachel explained to Bethany in child-friendly terms what would happen next. The seaplane, the bigger plane, the long flight to their new home. "Like in the Chronicles of Narnia," Bethany observed thoughtfully. "When the children have to leave London during the war." Helen and Rachel exchanged glances over the child's head. "Yes, something like that," Rachel agreed. "And just like in those stories, you're being very brave." A distant drone interrupted their conversation, the unmistakable sound of an approaching aircraft. Rachel tensed, checking her watch. "They're early," she muttered, moving swiftly to the window. She scanned the sky, then visibly relaxed. "It's our transport. Let's move." They gathered their belongings and stepped onto the porch. Through a gap in the trees, Helen could see a sleek seaplane descending toward the lake's glassy surface. The morning was crystalline, the air sharp with the scent of pine and approaching winter. As they walked down the path toward the shore, Bethany slipped her small hand into Helen's. "Grandma, are you scared?" Helen considered the question seriously. Was she scared? Yes, of course. But beneath the fear lay something unexpected, a steely determination she hadn't felt in decades, not since her early days of teaching in a tough Chicago neighborhood. "A little," she admitted, "but mostly I'm proud." "Of me?" Bethany asked. "Of you, of your father, and of us, for being brave enough to do what's right, even when it's difficult." She squeezed the child's hand. "Sometimes the most important journeys are the ones we never planned to take." The seaplane touched down on the lake with a spray of water, taxiing toward the small dock where they now stood. The pilot waved from the cockpit, a woman with short gray hair and a weathered face. Rachel hefted their bags. "Ready?" Helen took one last look at the cabin, memorizing its rustic silhouette against the morning sky. Then she turned toward the plane, toward the future, uncertain, unplanned, but somehow right. "Ready?" she said, and stepped forward. As the seaplane lifted off the lake's surface, banking gently toward the east, Helen watched the shoreline recede. Robert's cabin grew smaller until it was just a speck among the endless green of the forest. Beside her, Bethany pressed her face to the window, eyes wide with wonder rather than fear. Helen felt a peculiar sense of lightness. She had spent 68 years building a life, a career, a home, a community. Now all of that was behind her, and ahead lay, what? Uncertainty, yes. Danger, perhaps, but also possibility. A chance to reinvent herself when she had thought that chapter of her life complete. Rachel leaned across the aisle. "We'll be okay," she said, as if reading Helen's thoughts. "All of us." Helen nodded, surprised to find she believed it. Whatever came next, they would face it together. A retired teacher, a CIA officer, a 7-year-old with a stuffed rabbit, and eventually, a financial whistleblower who had risked everything for truth. An unlikely family, forged in crisis, bound by something stronger than blood, courage. If you enjoyed this journey with Helen, Bethany, and their unexpected adventure, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories like this one. Your support helps us continue creating these immersive narratives that keep you on the edge of your seat. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments below.